Okay, so if we're really talking about, so the first class is about really being a conduit. The second part of the class is really sharing that, speaking that out with witness, because it is a little different than than when you're in your room or when you're in front of a group or with someone else. So how do we do that? So I have a few points with that. The first would really be to drop the identification with the ego. So ego can be, the thing we all know, ego is like, I'm the greatest of the great. But ego, if ego can't be the greatest of the great, it will be the lowest of the low. You ever do that? Like, I'm clearly the most messed up person in the room, or I clearly can't do this. And that's just as much ego as, I'm so great. In fact, I would venture to say that many of us on a spiritual path would tend to go more towards collapsed ego. So drop identification with ego. Hopefully you can read my writing there. So I have a few stories for that. For expanded ego, there was one time I saw, Michael and I saw someone after an event, and they were very in this like expanded place, and it was like kind of like, in one way that's really beautiful. In another way, he said, negative power does I'm so great, whereas spirit's just like God is great. We're all great. Life is great. So just to kind of recognize that. So that's an expanded ego can go into over responsibility. I need to save you. I need for you to get it. I need to fix you. That's over. Now the thing is, the ego swings. It goes from expanded into collapsed. You ever go like commit to something, like 28 things, and then later you're like, what was I thinking? Because the ego is now swung from expanded ego to small ego. So one way with that is just to, when you're going to commit to things, to just kind of go, I'll get back to you. And wait for the ego to swing back. So collapsed ego, I was at a training and someone said, I want to write a book about God, but I don't feel worthy. And JR said, it's not that you are worthy to write about God, it's that God is worthy to be written about. It really takes us out of it. So if we go, well, I have this calling, but I don't think I'm worthy, my brothers and sisters, I'm literally, I facilitated maybe 90 trainings with Michael. I'm still up there going, I'm not coming downstairs. I'm not. I literally locked my door, by the way, right? Here I am. So it's really just called the love pulls us forward. My love of you, my just falling in love with your magnificence and knowing that spirit comes through you in a way it doesn't through anyone else. I want to empower that. I really want to encourage you because you each have something so beautiful to share, truly. And that's why I'm standing here, shaking, dropping things, etc. Because I love you. And I want spirit to be able to flow through you. But it's tough for spirit to do that if you're just staying in your room. Okay? So I was doing another training that I do called Soul Dance, which many of you know about. And I was really nervous because a particular support system I had with it was not going to be supporting me anymore. And I said to, have you heard of Byron Katie? She's a beautiful woman, and I was I was talking to her daughter, and I said, who is also great, who does her work really beautifully, and I said, I'm not going to be able to do this, and something devastating had just happened, and I said, I'm not clear to facilitate this class, and by the way, the class is 100% unscripted. It's all being a conduit. There's no script. It's just making it up as I go, every class. And she said, really, you're not a worthy conduit, not a worthy vessel. I'm like, no way. There's no way I can do this. And she said, do you think spirit is limited by you? God is not great enough to come through an unworthy vessel? Really? You're limiting God that much? So It's really not about us at all. Sorry. It's, if you think it's bad news that you're not worthy to be a conduit of God, I have worse news for you. You're not even relevant. That's what the ego hates. 2, drop identification with self at all. Yeah, kind of self-explanatory. Like if you're going to be a conduit, if you're going to really be spirit, you can write your, last time it was 32 pages. I believe this is 23 pages. Script for self-soothing purposes, and then be willing to toss it out if that's what spirit, my beautiful sound guys who are so amazing, so amazing. I said to them, we went over everything, and I said, I may not do many parts of this. I may do something entirely different because I'm not in charge. So just a real personal story about dropping identification with self. So right now, I'm in a lot of changes. Both my children, who've been my life, are going to college out of state. My relationship with Michael is changing. Both my parents are not well. Pretty much everything in my life is shifting. And I could shake and go, well, how come it all has to happen at once? And then when I thought, the one thing I thought that Danny, my younger child, was going to be going to school in California, and he's going to school out of state. And I'm like, and I was starting to feel really contracted and just despairing about that. And then I heard this voice in me pull up saying, oh, maybe I am actually going to be doing the work. Oh, maybe that's why everything is shifting sands right now, because I'm supposed to be dropping my story. So for me, my kids are the hardest one to drop. So I just say that for you, if something is shifting in your life, perhaps it's so you can be a greater vessel. 3, access the divine unknowing. So what the heck is the divine unknowing? Beats me. And really, that's what it is. So it's really going into the I don't know. If I learned nothing else from Michael, and I learned a whole lot from him, but the main thing was the divine unknowing, to be in a place of the divine unknowing. So the divine unknowing that's the divine unknowing. Blank slate, right? Accessing spirit and going into that place where there's no sound, there's nothing. And that's the source from whence all knowing comes. I was at so many years ago, before I started facilitating, right when I started facilitating soul dance. I started soul dance, by the way, because I was terrified to dance in public. That's why I started it. Oh, that's part of why. It was also a spiritual expression for me, but I was not a dancer. Still am not. But I'd started this class and it became popular, and so I decided my next stretch was to dance by myself on stage in public. And because soul dance, the lights are low and it's very much not a performance. And I went up on stage to do the sound check, and I went right after. So the facilitator was a professional dancer, and the person who went right before me was a professional dancer. Right? None of the other acts were dancing, by the way, besides mine. And I went up there and I did the whatever I did, and I came out, and clearly the facilitator hated it. She was like, thanks, didn't even let me do the whole sound check. And I went back to the back of the room, and there was, at the time, 500-600 people or something. It was a big training, maybe 300 or 400. Anyway, it was a lot of people. And I went to the back of the room, and I said to John Roger, I said, ugh, what was I thinking? I should have taken real dance classes. And he said, no. He said, because if you took real dance classes, you'd be following choreography, right? And he said, this way you've got to be with Spirit. And I said, oh, it's like I have to follow Spirit. He said, no, be with Spirit. So I went up the next day for the performance, and the spotlight came on me, and I stood there, and I was determined not to move until the Spirit moved me. Even if I stood there and I stared at all of those hundreds of people for the entire song. So the music came on, my song is on, and I'm not moving. I'm just sitting there waiting for the Spirit to move me, if it will. But that was my commitment. And then the Spirit moved me. And it was like I saw a shaft of light, and I just moved in that, and I started moving. I guess something that approximated a dance. And then I came off the stage not knowing, how people responded to it at all. And then I turned around and I had a standing ovation. But the thing that was most important to me is I went back to JR, and he said, very, very good. So to me, that's the divine unknowing, the willingness to be that blank slate. Especially if you work with clients, which a lot of you do, or you're just ministering to someone. It's really willing. Somebody might bring you something huge, and they're sitting there, and they're paying you, and they're looking at you. And I've sat there and I call it stared stupidly, until at them looking into their eyes and not talking until the Spirit starts talking. Right? That's, to me, the divine unknowing. So that's step 3. Step 4 is, once you access the divine unknowing, is really to allow the knowing to drop in step by step. Step by step, word by word, symbol by symbol. I see things symbolically, however you perceive it. So it's like you're in the divine unknowing. And you might then start to receive, and this is a beautiful way to get information for yourself, to get experience for yourself. You might start to receive, finally, after you've stared stupidly for a while, something. And then it's like, you trust that. And you start to interpret that. Right? And I mean it, like I will get just very vague symbols like this. But if I trust that, more starts to drop in, and I don't know what I'm looking at, and more starts to drop in. And I might be here, and the person's like, maybe they've shared they have a life-threatening illness, and they're like, and I'll start to share, this part, and maybe it'll be about something about their family member or something. And they'll be like, oh my God, how did you know that? And what's the rest of it? And I'll be like, I don't know, all I got is this. And I don't know what this means yet. Let's trust Spirit. And then it's like you keep getting more information, you ask them questions, and it starts to make a little more sense. You get feedback. I'm not an artist, so hopefully this will be something. I don't know what this is yet, by the way. Okay? And then it starts to make more sense. So it's horse. Like I have to tell you what I just drew. But then it starts to come together and it makes sense. Right? Have you ever had that experience? So our 4 steps, so drop identification with ego, drop identification with self at all. Access the divine unknowing, and I might say access and trust the divine unknowing. Allow the knowing to drop in. And the 5th step, speak from Spirit. So speaking from Spirit, where you're allowing the words to flow, is different than speaking about Spirit. I've been speaking about Spirit, right? So speaking it from Spirit, you're really allowing the Spirit to speak you. So let's see who's present. And when I'm upbringing in the Spirit, it can be helpful to know who's present, but not necessary. And so who I'm experiencing as present is the Divine Mother. One might call that the Mother Mary, the Divine Feminine, the Mother God. You decide. Everything leads us into that dance with the Beloved. You might falter and have the temptation, inspired by darkness or Lucifer, to judge yourself or have regret. But doing so is a form of evicting the Christ. For that faltering, that seeming mistake, gives God so much information about you, His beloved. Everything traipses us home to the Beloved. Do you not know in your heart of hearts, the Spirit surrounds you, I, the Divine Mother, surround you like a warm cloak, like the deepest comfort, even in the moments when you feel so alone. This is self-evident. And yet, would you receive it right this moment in those secret hurts, that place, that thing that holds you back from being a conduit? Would you not receive the warmth, the love of the Divine Mother now, healing you, nourishing you, nurturing you, cherishing you? Just your intention to show up is enough. Allow the Spirit to take the rest and make it magical, beautiful, a masterpiece. This is your life purpose. Relax into me and let me take you on the wind, on the sound of God, into the heart of the Beloved beating in your own chest. Amen.